of chapter 6. Moving on, as I said, next session begins lesson 1 of the Holy Spirit, which is actually chapter 6.5, then lesson 2 and lesson 3. And they are, in my view, the beginning of the real program for learning. But before you get to the beginning, there's certain foundations that are needed. That's what we've been working on. We'll continue to work on that today. So, welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica, and our reader for today is, who is it? Susie H.
Remember that the Holy Spirit is the answer, not the question. The ego always speaks first. It is capricious and does not mean its maker well. It believes, and correctly, that its maker may withdraw his support from it at any moment. If it meant you well, it would be glad, as the Holy Spirit will be glad when he has brought you home and you no longer need his guidance. The ego does not regard itself as part of you. Herein lies its primary error, the foundation of its whole thought system.
Mm-hmm. So I would like it if everything we read by the time we finish discussion is fully understood by you. So we start at the beginning. God created our most holy mind. You and I are all thoughts in the mind of God. This is in the beginning. And somewhere a crazy mad idea occurred. What else could there be other than this holy, infinite mind of God? And that's where the separation begins, or a little bit of our mind splits off, wondering what else is there, and that part is very confused. So the ego was the first one to initiate the split, and so it always in your mind jumps quickly to try to speak first whenever you react to anything. The ego speaks first. The ego does not mean its maker well. Who was the maker of the ego? The maker of the ego was your most holy mind. The ego came out of your most holy mind. It does not mean the holy mind well. It believes that the holy mind may withdraw support from the ego at any moment, and this would be a good thing. This is what we're here. So here begins the confusion. We just said that the ego emerged out of our holy mind, but the ego does not regard itself as part of you. It has a crazy self-concept. It views itself as independent, as separate from you. And herein is its primary error, the foundation of its whole thought system. Why is this important? Because in order to correct our mind, we have to go back to the point in which the error began. Said another way, in order to heal, there are surface level issues that one can work on in healing. But to really heal, you have to go to the core of the problem, the core of the dis-ease, which is the foundation of the ego's thought system, that it does not regard itself as part of you. It thinks it's an independent entity, that it's autonomous.
When God created you, he made you part of him. That is why attack within the kingdom is impossible. You made the ego without love, and so it does not love you. You could not remain within the kingdom without love. And since the kingdom is love, you believe that you are without it. This enables the ego to regard itself as separate and outside its maker, thus speaking for the part of your mind that believes you are separate and outside the mind of God. The ego then raised the first question that was ever asked, but one it can never answer. That question, what are you, was the beginning of doubt. The ego has never answered any question since, although it has raised a great many. The most inventive activities of the ego have never done more than obscure the question, because you have the answer and the ego is afraid of you.
So we said that we have to go back to the beginning where the error started. And here's the format that I would have you memorize. It's very simple. The ego, not the spirit. Spirit is not, has no questions about these things, but the ego asked, what are you? And this is where uncertainty and doubt and fear began. This proves to be, it may not have as much meaning to you at this moment, but it proves to have substantial basis for all of the confusion there is not understanding the nature of your true being and being uncertain about that. And that's the basis of what we would call insanity, not knowing what you are. And so this is the point of really attack where the ego puts a seeds of doubt in your mind to suggest that you should be the one to answer this question. Caution here now. The ego asks you, what are you? Leaving you to believe that the answer is up to you. We'll find that that's not true. Letitia?
Yes, Jonica. Sorry to go back a few minutes, but I'm getting snagged on what you said, that the ego comes from our most holy mind.
Yeah, well, we actually, the more correct elucidation of that is that we made the ego, meaning we gave origin. It's a miscreation. The ego is a collection of thoughts. Okay, it's not an entity, it's a collection of thoughts. Where did those thoughts come from? They came from our mind. Thoughts leave not their source. They came from our mind. And so our mind is part of the most holy mind, but this is using our free will, Atisha, inappropriately. This is a mistake to attempt to think a thought outside of the mind of God. We know that that's impossible. You cannot depart outside the mind of God, but it's a belief that one can. Now, I know that sounds crazy because the ego is insane and its whole foundation is unsubstantial. It's not rooted in truth or fact, but this is the way we narrate the story.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. By the way, it would be normal for that to not feel completely adequate an explanation, but so I understand. But these things have how do you begin to create chaos out of perfection is a very difficult thing to understand. I want to make one more comment here. But before I do, Susie, you had your hand up.
Well, I was just going to say, to simplify it for me, my mind was only always holy until the separation. So if it was my mind or our collective minds, it came from our holy mind. And I think it's one of these paragraphs that you often speak about, like, don't put that much thought into it. Just kind of like take it for what it says, because to intellectualize it and to try to figure it out is more difficult. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Susie. That summarizes it. Just take it as a statement here without trying to noodle over all the logic and the perhaps even the theology of it. This course is not intended to be a theology. It's intended to be a path to help you find inner peace. And it's very effective at that. I want to make, thank you, Susie, for that. I want to make one more, highlight one more issue here, is that the ego was created without love. And so the ego does not love you. In fact, it's your permanent critic. The ego is there to make you feel less than lovable. And I am going to go out on a limb here and make a comment that there are many workshops and New Age retreats and programs that try to help you come to love yourself. And if the concept of the ego as a little part of your mind in relationship to your holy mind, if that's not understood, then what we're trying to do is get the ego to become loving towards you. And what the Course says is the ego was made without love. It doesn't know love. It can't know love. Therefore, an attempt to get your ego, to convince your ego to start loving you is futile. It's the Course would say just we're trying to replace one illusion with a better illusion. Okay, so circle back to our main point here that I would have you memorize. The first question the ego asked was, what are you? This was the beginning of doubt, and we have to clarify the answer now to that question, and we'll do that in a moment.
You cannot understand the conflict until you fully understand the basic fact that the ego cannot know anything. The Holy Spirit does not speak first, but he always answers. Everyone has called upon him for help at one time or another, and in one way or another, and has been answered. Since the Holy Spirit answers truly, he answers for all time, which means that everyone has the answer now. The ego cannot hear the Holy Spirit, but it does believe that part of the mind that made it is against it. It interprets this as a justification for attacking its maker. It believes that the best defense is attack and wants you to believe it. Unless you do believe it, you will not side with it. And the ego feels badly in need of allies, though not of brothers. Perceiving something alien to itself in your mind, the ego turns to the body as its ally because the body is not part of you. This makes the body the ego's friend. It is an alliance, frankly, based on separation. If you side with this alliance, you will be afraid, because you are siding with an alliance of fear.
Oh my, there is so much said in this one screen here. This is why this is foundational. This is why it would be not recommended to launch into further chapters of the textbook without understanding the concepts that are presented right here. So we could talk about it all for the remainder of the session, but let me point out what I think is the most depth psychology of anything I have read anywhere in all the psychological and philosophy books and spiritual books. It's this. So we said that the ego emerged out of the mind and thinks that it's its own independent entity. And it does believe that the holy part of the mind that made it is unhappy with it. And the ego interprets everything in terms of a conflict and says, well, I'm going to attack the holy mind. This is abstract, I know, but hear me out. Please try your best to understand the little ego based in fear is now going to initiate a conflict against the most holy mind. Actually, the ego is justified in that because the ego is not going to win this battle. So it believes the best defense is to attack. This gives origin to attack thoughts. This is where the weaponization of the mind begins. It produces a conflict, an inner conflict between the loving nature of your most holy mind and the attack thoughts of your little ego mind. The Course says this is the basic conflict of humanity, is the ego trying to fight against the holy mind. And then if that were not enough, that the ego is attacking, how can it win against attacking God, essentially? How can it win that? If that were not enough, now it's going to go on a lifelong campaign to convince your mind that you to have it join in the ego's attack, to have you believe that you are the ego and therefore you are the attacker. And if you look around our world, I think you can find a lot of examples of that, where people believe they are the ego and they believe they are the attacker. So, and the ego, its plan is to recruit your body image as its ally, to say ego plus body equals a device that can be used in the world for opposition, for separation, for attack. It's an alliance, frankly, based on separation. And to summarize for a minute, you can take for granted that the ego is going to do this. That there's no question that the fearful ego is going to be afraid of the holy mind, that it's going to introduce conflict and fear and attack, and try to introduce the body as its main symbol, as its object. But everything hinges upon the final statement here. If you side with this alliance, that's the big if. If your mind then says, yeah, I buy into the ego's propaganda, I buy into that theory, that delusional system, if you side with this alliance, you will be afraid because you are siding with an alliance of fear. That is the major error that can be corrected by this course, is to cause you to no longer think of yourself as an ego, think of yourself as symbolized by the body, and no longer join your holy mind with that alliance, but instead correct that and say, I am not a body. I'm free. I'm not an ego. I am as God created me, and thus correct the fundamental error that began right here. Let me pause on that because you can probably tell I'm impassioned about this. Everything I've read in A Course in Miracles leads me to believe that the problem begins right here. And it also says, as long as there's all this is vague and we don't understand it, then we can't, when thoughts arise in our own mind, we will be confused as to where are they coming from? Why am I having all these judgments, all this guilt, all this fear? The basis, it all began somewhere. It begins right here, the ego attacking its maker and then trying to recruit both the body and your free will into that alliance. Heather?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you because I see it now. I see the battlefield, and it's just so insidious. So it's just very helpful the way you just described it. I see how central it is to the teaching that we understand how the body gets hijacked by the ego. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm asserting, this is broad, this is Jonica's point of view. I'm asserting the entire world, everybody in the world, begins with this confusion of having a little tiny ego mind that's afraid, and we get invited to join that alliance. Some people escape that alliance earlier than others, but obviously a lot of people do not, and this is why the Course in Miracles has been given. Susie?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this, this is going into my 5th year. And like you said, we have to get this, but you get it so much deeper, like Heather was saying, like, I really get this now. And like a great example of this is I don't talk this way anymore. Like, I am sad. I am lonely. I say things like, oh, I'm feeling sad because I am not sad. It's like my ego is sad. You said something on Saturday when I listened to the video. It was in the reading that, we think we're the ego. So we think we are sad. We think all of these things until we are learning to be taught differently. Like, so of course, the whole world thinks this way. Like, and I love the way it's explained that my ego has turned to my body. That really explains it so well, Jonica, as its ally. So of course, I'll just speak for myself, but of course I was totally confused because I 100% thought my ego was me and my body, and that's all that I was. So, how incredibly freeing anyway, but this is so fundamental, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Just for
even just replacing, like, I am not sad. I am not hungry. I'm feeling that way. Just takes that, you know what I'm saying? Takes that, it's not that I am. I'm not, because I might not be sad in 10 minutes. So it's not eternal.
Right.
It's not a thought from the Holy, it's not a thought from God. I am thinking with the ego.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Susie. So just for reference, we'll refer to this as the big lie. This is where it began, the big lie, because the entire world has been invited to join into this lie. That makes it big. And many people, they're innocent. This begins very early on in life, as you know. This confusion about identity begins when we're just little ones. We're not even old enough to to drive or do any kind of responsible activities. We need to hold our hands of our parents when we cross the street, and we're already being surreptitiously invited to join into this alliance of the ego. All right, so we're going to have to talk how to get out of this.
The ego uses the body to conspire against your mind. And because the ego realizes that its enemy can end them both merely by recognizing they are part of you. They are not part of you. They join in the attack together. This is perhaps the strangest perception of all, if you consider what it really involves. The ego, which is not real, attempts to persuade the mind, which is real, that the mind is the ego's learning device, and further, that the body is more real than the mind is. No one in his right mind could possibly believe this, and no one in his right mind does believe it.
Mm-hmm. So from this original error, there's a domino effect, a series of beliefs, faulty beliefs, are going to follow that go deeper and deeper and deeper into total confusion, as they call it here, the strangest perception of all, if you consider what it involves. And so the ego is going to, it's in a warfare is the correct word. It's not just conflict. Warfare against your most holy mind. And the ego believes your holy mind is its enemy, and it believes, correctly so, that your holy mind can end them both merely by recognizing that the ego is not part of you. Therefore, so we've got this battle set up here. And by the way, speaking about the Western philosophy from Descartes through Kant, through Hegel, and others, that Western, they recognize these issues. They question these things. They did not have insights. Oh, they did. I take it back. They had insights, but they were partial insights. They were trying to feel their way through. What is the relationship of the mind to the body, of the self to the mind, and the self to the body? And many of them got very confused. So it says the ego attempts to persuade the mind that the mind is the ego's learning device, that the mind belongs to the ego, that the ego should be in control, and that the mind should be its tool, its learning device. And further, the ego tries to state that the body is more real than the mind is. Well, if you believe that, then you're really far into a very narrow materialistic belief. No one in his right mind could possibly believe this. So I've read these things, these statements by philosophers that where they really believe these things, that they asserted the supremacy of the body over the mind. Matter of fact, every combination of relationships between mind and body and self has been proposed, and some of them prevail over longer periods of time. Vast confusion, which is probably why most of you have not studied philosophy, because to do that is to look into a vast set of confusion. No one in their right mind would believe it. So there must be an answer, Susie.
Hear then the one answer of the Holy Spirit to all the questions the ego raises. You are a child of God. a priceless part of his kingdom, which he created as part of him. Nothing else exists, and only this is real. You have chosen a sleep in which you have had bad dreams, but the sleep is not real, and God calls you to awake. There will be nothing left of your dream when you hear him, because you will awaken. Your dreams contain many of the ego's symbols, and they have confused you. Yet that was only because you were asleep and did not know. When you wake, you will see the truth around you, and you will no longer believe in dreams, because they will have no reality for you. Yet the kingdom and all that you have created there will have great reality for you, because they are beautiful and true.
This might help some of you with Atisha's inquiry about, how could the ego come, how could its maker be the holy mind? So let's switch the metaphor to now one of dreaming. A part of your holy mind is dreaming. It's a dream. It's not a reality. It's a dream. But as you know, when you're experiencing a dream, it sure seems real. I've actually stood up and walked across the room while I was dreaming before. I mean, can actually engage the body in these things, sleepwalking. So the ego is a dream. It's a nightmare. It's a dream that the holy mind is having. And just like in a real dream, a sleeping dream, a dream can end. And when it's over, you realize, oh, that was nonsense. I'm here now. I'm awake in the real world. This is a course in helping you to awake from the dream that you are an ego. It's not a reality. It is a set of, inside that dream are a set of beliefs and a set of consequences, which are dark and uninviting or sad and joyless. And this is a program to help accelerate your awakening. And the word accelerate is well chosen here. We want to do this sooner than would otherwise happen. So the answer to this section is called The Only Answer. The original question is, what are you? The Holy Spirit is the one to give the answer. The ego wants you to believe that you should look to yourself, your ego self, for the answer. So then we would have, with 7 billion people, we would have maybe 7 billion different answers. What am I? But there's one answer that equally is applicable to all living beings. And that is, you are a priceless part of God's kingdom, which is created as a part of him. Has it left? No. Nothing else exists, and only this is real. There's a sleep which you have chosen and are having a bad dream. But the sleep itself, despite appearances, is not real. And God is calling you to awake. So I think that metaphor of your most holy mind is having a dream, a bad dream, is the most useful format for understanding this relationship. Because it bakes into it the understanding that we're being called to awaken from the dream. Because none of this would be of any significance unless there was a means of awakening from the dream. Susie?
I just want to say something really quick. I know you want to leave it, there will be nothing left of your dream when you hear him. They say it's a practical course. It is a practical course. And I just wanted to share that, when some healing happens in your mind about something you thought that could never be changed, which is a miracle, a shift in your thinking, right? It's as if those thoughts are gone.
Mhm.
It's when healing occurs, it's like there's nothing left of it. And that's how come I really understand this now, because I've experienced some major shifts in my thinking, and this stuff no longer exists for me. Otherwise it's really what's the word? It seems it's really hard to understand. I think it has to be experienced to really know that, yeah, that's all that it really is. It's yeah. I just wanted to share that because
Yeah, the experience. You're so right about that, Susie. A lot of this will seem like spiritual theory,
abstract. I was to say with the word I was thinking it was abstract, right?
but it's abstract spiritual theory. It might seem that way because we're talking about something that seems so different from the way the world teaches. But when you experience it firsthand for yourself, you say, "That's no theory. I just experienced that. Now I know. Now I see." That's part of the awakening, is to experience it yourself. And they say that this is a universal set of experiences. This idea of awakening to the truth of how we were created and what we are is shared by all mortals. Okay, we got a little bit more we have to dive into.
in the kingdom where you are and where you are and what you are is perfectly certain. There is no doubt, because the first question was never asked. Having finally been wholly answered, it has never been. Being alone lives in the kingdom, where everything lives in God without question. The time spent on questioning in the dream has given way to creation and to its eternity. You are as certain as God, because you are as true as He is. But what was once certain in your mind has become only the ability for certainty. The introduction of abilities into being was the beginning of uncertainty, because abilities are potentials, not accomplishments. Your abilities are useless in the presence of God's accomplishments, and also of yours. Accomplishments are results that have been achieved. When they are perfect, abilities are meaningless. It is curious that the perfect must now be perfected. In fact, it is impossible. Remember, however, that when you put yourself in an impossible situation, you believe that the impossible is possible.
Mm-hmm. So he's laying out the plan for learning, for all of us to learn. First of all, to not accept the state of dreaming in a world of chaos as our life, to not live with that as quote normal. I'll point out a statement here. The time, think of this as your life, the time spent on questioning in the dream, your life spent wondering, what am I? What is life's meaning? What is love about? Am I lovable? Who do I love? All those questions. And they go on and on and on and on. It never ends. A lifetime spent questioning basic fun. What am I doing here? What is my purpose? Basic issues. That time, wouldn't you be happy to, instead of spending your life on those questions, give way to creation and to eternity? This is what awakening is. And the formula for it is given right here. It lies with an ability, developing your abilities. Now, please understand, we mean like when you were 1 year old, you didn't know how to talk, right? You didn't know how to read. You didn't know how to walk. You had to develop those abilities to read and talk and walk. Well, there are many, many abilities that you do with your mind. You learn to train your mind to focus on the truth and not on the illusion. These are abilities. So, the Holy Spirit is our guide and our teacher to help us acquire the abilities necessary to stop going back and revisiting the ego alliance and looking for any hope of happiness there, and develop the ability instead to turn inward towards the light within. That's an ability. It's a learning, that it's a practice to turn towards the light within and ask, is there another way here? Remember, the ego always speaks first, and the Holy Spirit always answers immediately afterwards. It's the ability to pause and turn within, look in that direction. So and by the way, those abilities are only necessary to get us out of the dreaming. The shorthand version is, in the kingdom of heaven, you don't need these abilities because you're already awake. But while we're dreaming, we need to develop the ability to recognize, I must be dreaming. That could not be true. That notion, that thought, that feeling that just arose in me is not the path to peace. I must be dreaming. And I know if I turn within to the Holy Spirit, there's another way, another choice, another possibility here. So we've got to develop a few abilities. And you've been doing that all your life. And now, under the Holy Spirit's guidance, you are sure to succeed.
Abilities must be developed before you can use them. This is not true of anything that God created, but it is the kindest solution possible for what you made. In an impossible situation, you can develop your abilities to the point where they can get you out of it. You have a guide to how to develop them, but you have no commander except yourself. This leaves you in charge of the kingdom, with both a guide to find it and a means to keep it. You have a model to follow who will strengthen your command and never detract from it in any way. You therefore retain the central place in your imagined enslavement, which in itself demonstrates that you are not enslaved.
Mm-hmm. I believe it's my perception that this is one of the hardest lessons that I'll say Americans in this era face. And that is taking responsibility for the use of your willpower. To say, if it's to be, it's up to me. You have no commander except yourself. Nobody else is going to wake you up from the dream of being an ego unless you so choose. It's your free willpower. You retain the central place, the commander seat in your imagined enslavement. You need not be enslaved, but if you imagine yourself to be enslaved, and your willpower becomes distorted for the ego's purposes, then you will continue to remain in prison. This is the ancient in prison here, to be enslaved by the ego. And so being responsible for your own thoughts, your own feelings, for your own freedom. It doesn't mean you have to make up the path or how it's done. It does mean that you have to be willing to choose again to say yes to the guidance of the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit is your guide. Christ is your model. He's demonstrated how this can be done. Your willpower is the commander in charge. And my point is, what people seem to be lulled into a type of malaise or a passivity or a type of sleep, that kind of waiting for somebody else to come along and make it better. And that is not true. You retain the central place in your journey.
You are in an impossible situation only because you think it is possible to be in one. You would be in an impossible situation if God showed you your perfection and proved to you that you were wrong. This would demonstrate that the perfect are inadequate to bring themselves to an awareness of their perfection, and thus side with the belief that those who have everything need help and are therefore helpless. This is the kind of reasoning in which the ego engages. God, who knows that his creations are perfect, does not affront them. This would be as impossible as the ego's notion that it has affronted him.
So what's needed here is a gentle awakening. This is a thread that runs throughout the course. If a person is in a nightmare where literally you're sweating, your heart is pounding, your respiration is up, and you suddenly waken them, they will continue to feel all that fear. They're in a fearful state, and they'll continue to be in a fearful state for the next few moments until they fully come out of it. Well, the Course says that in order for you and I to awaken, we must first overcome our self-made fears, the tendency to believe in the ego's chaos and to believe in the fearful thoughts and feelings that it makes and identify with them. We must begin. This is where freedom from fear was what we did in January and February. Freedom from fear. First, take responsibility that your own mind is generating the fear and that only you can stop generating that fear. And then we can begin to reorient towards the Holy Spirit and take steps that will gently awaken us rather than suddenly shocking us into an awakening. So this is a process that unfolds for most people. This is a process that unfolds gently over several years. Susie just testified, and Heather as well, that though they have been at this for a handful of years, the depth of their understanding and appreciation, the number of levels that they see it on, the way it's applicable to their own lives is far more profound now than it was perhaps when we just read it as a nice theory the first time through.
That is why the Holy Spirit never commands. To command is to assume inequality, which the Holy Spirit demonstrates does not exist. Fidelity to premises is a law of mind, and everything God created is faithful to his laws. Fidelity to other laws is also possible, however, not because the laws are true, but because you made them. What would be gained if God proved to you that you have thought insanely? Can God lose his own certainty? I have frequently said that what you teach, you are. Would you have God teach you that? Wait a minute. Would you have God teach you that you have sinned? If he confronted the self you made with the truth he created for you, what could you be but afraid? You would doubt your right mind, which is the only place where you can find the sanity he gave you.
So the point that I want to emphasize here are being faithful to the laws of God, the laws of creation, the laws of healing and of love. How can you be faithful to a set of laws that you don't understand? That they're a mystery? When a situation arises in your life, you don't have any guidance to follow. What it says is that you can be faithful to other laws as possible as well. We're talking about the laws of this world, the laws the ego would have you believe in. So, what the two sets of laws, God's laws, the ego's laws, we're going to need to learn what those laws of God are and to recognize the laws of the ego, which are thought to be normal by most people, that those are actually laws of chaos and disorder and separation. We need to learn to distinguish those two laws so that our mind can choose correctly. For instance, a path of peace. You have to understand the laws of peace in order to choose the path of peace. Otherwise, you might choose the first thought or feeling that arises in your mind and not realize that that was a prompting of the ego. And so, throughout the remainder of the textbook, we will be, from time to time, be introducing various laws of forgiveness, laws of healing, laws of peace, laws of love, laws of creation. They're really all one set of laws, but they have different application. And so we learn, you will have to learn these laws to make distinctions. Just think if you were in another country where the driving laws are entirely different than the ones that you follow now. What if red meant go and green meant stop and you didn't know? How confusing that would be. We have to learn these laws and learn to operate according to the laws of peace and healing.
God does not teach. To teach is to imply a lack, which God knows is not there. God is not conflicted. Teaching aims at change, but God created only the changeless. The separation was not a loss of perfection, but a failure in communication. A harsh and stringent form of communication arose as the ego's voice. It could not shatter the peace of God, but it could shatter yours. God did not blot it out, because to eradicate it would be to attack it. Being questioned, he did not question. He merely gave the answer. His answer is your teacher.
Mm-hmm. So there's one thing that I'm going to ask. You can think of this as an assignment if you wish. And that is having to do with this one statement that whose meaning may become more clear later on. I'm asking you now to take the assignment of learning this statement. It's a simple statement. The separation was not a loss of perfection, but it was a failure in communication. Therefore, the correction to that is to restore communication, not to restore perfection. Perfection was never lost. The separation appears to be, okay, so let me contrast this for a minute with some of the mythologies that are found in many religions. Many religions believe that you are now full of sin, and God kicks us out of the garden and we're unworthy, blacklisted, however you want to describe it. This would be a loss of perfection. And that being and your nature is sinful. Well, what the Course teaches is that's might have been effective in its day for the people that it was guiding. But now in our day, there's a higher guidance available. And that is that your perfection has never been lost. But there is no doubt that perfect communication with the Creator has been temporarily suspended. And this course goal is to position your mind such in a state of inner peace, such that you can then resume communication with the Creator and all of creation. And to that goal, we will have to learn about the lessons of the Holy Spirit, which we will do in our next session.
Jonica, doesn't that sort of answer Tisha's question in a way, in a kind of different way, right? It was a failure in communication.
Yes, we're dreaming a dream where we think we're completely cut off and believe that our nature has changed, a loss of perfection. We're going to restore the awareness of your true nature, remove all those doubts by restoring communication. But that is done, communication is done with your mind, not your body. The error is in the mind, and the mind is going to learn to communicate again. Remember, it's an ability that you develop. It's going to use abilities to learn to communicate once again with pure spirit. And for that, we will have to follow more guidance from the Holy Spirit, which we will do in our next session. Noelle?
That definition also makes the turning toward the Holy Spirit and our right mind a little easier to conceive for me, because so much of what went before sounds to me like the ego is this horrible monster. And what can I do to combat it? But now this last failure of communication puts it into more manageable terms, that I simply need to turn away from it and recognize my perfection.
Thank you, Noelle, for what you just said. It is so true. And I think probably every Course in Miracles student goes through that stage of seeing the ego as this terrible monster. It wants you to give your power of your faith to it. It's all powerful ego. And what we're doing is we're taking it down a notch. We're taking it down several notches. It's merely just a frightened belief system now. And there's no magic in the restoration of this communication. But we do need to listen to the voice for guidance. She'll take care of everything else. That was very well said, Noel. We're done with today's session, but we're just beginning in many other ways with the lessons of the Holy Spirit. And so we'll look forward to connecting once again. Thank you all for your willingness to follow Spirit guidance here. Thank you, Susie, for your reading. Thank you all for your comments. We'll look forward to connecting again with you real soon. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you, Susie.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Susie.
Bye.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
Jonica.
Love you all. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Jonica, I want to say that